Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship. I'm Scott Stirrett, founder and CEO of Venture for Canada and your host. The focus of this podcast is to hear from changemakers and young Canadian entrepreneurs to learn how they develop their entrepreneurial mindset and skills. In season 1, we'll be chatting with young Canadians about their entrepreneurial journey as Venture for Canada Fellow Alumni. I'm excited to dive into these conversations about how to foster your entrepreneurial mindset and drive.
Welcome to a new wave of entrepreneurship podcasts, normally hosted by Venture for Canada's very own CEO, Scott Stirrett. Today, it is hosted by myself, Lateefa Farah, and I am the digital content and marketing coordinator here at Venture for Canada. I'm a lover of all things visually creative, but I also love understanding the human mind and how we as humans connect with one another through behavior and language. For a special episode to wrap up our first season, we've decided to change things up by sitting down with their host, Scott, to reflect on what he discussed with our guests over the past few months. We were super lucky to speak with VFC Fellow Alumni with different backgrounds and views. Each guest came with unique and inspiring entrepreneurial views and had super diverse experiences which offered us advice on customer success management, staying grounded in our personal lives, personal development habits, and most importantly, building communities. In this special episode, we will be breaking down some of the key things that both Scott and myself learned through this recording process. So let's get started. Scott, how are you today?
I am doing great on this beautiful spring, mid-April day in Toronto. I think nothing makes a Canadian happier than a beautiful spring day after a long winter, particularly after a winter in quarantine. So definitely very happy today.
I'm very happy to hear that. It's actually quite strange being the one interviewing you today after being the person who's been on the sidelines and listening to you host the conversations. So it's actually nice being able to be in your shoes today. So as you know, we spoke with various VFC fellows, some of who this was the first time in a couple of years that you were able to catch up with. And I wanted to know, what were your top 3 takeaways from recording this season?
So many different takeaways, but I'll start with the first one, which is it comes up in the first episode of the season with Kiki, which is the importance of embracing the journey rather than the outcome. And I think that this is so important for a couple of reasons. One is that I think by focusing too much on the outcome, it really feeds into a lot of people's perfectionist tendencies. That the reality is that there's just a lot of luck in life, and sometimes things don't work out, or sometimes people make mistakes and there's failures. And I think we really focus more on what are the things I learned from this experience? What's the joy that I got out of that experience? What are the things that I'll remember from that experience? That if you embrace the journey more, if you really enjoy the journey more, you're actually more likely to have a more successful outcome, because you'll be less stressed out, you'll be less anxious. And I think that the advice that Kiki gave about the importance of embracing the journey rather than the outcome is very relevant and timely for anyone at any stage in their career. The second point that I really want to talk about is the importance of lifelong learning. And we see this in episodes across this season, from Mark Dillon talking about his learning journey, to Manuela, to Chris, is really the importance of always viewing learning as a really important goal. That learning doesn't stop in high school or in university. It's really something that is lifelong. And it's something that you need to do every single day. That we all have such a capacity to learn new things. And in a world that is changing so rapidly, it's essential to constantly be learning. And the way you learn can be through so many different ways. It can be through reading books. It can be through learning by doing. It can be through taking courses. It can be through listening to podcasts. And one thing I think that really defines a lot of Venture for Canada fellows is that emphasis on lifelong learning and curiosity. And I was listening to an interview of Walter Isaacson recently, who was a biographer of Albert Einstein and many other kind of famous scientists and leaders, including Benjamin Franklin. And one of the things he really talks about is that curiosity is one of the things that defines those thinkers who are transformational or really have some of the biggest breakthroughs. That they're the kind of people that they look outside and they see the sky's blue and they ask, why is the sky blue? And I think that comes up in with a lot of Venture for Canada fellows, is that there's this kind of relentless curiosity. And that's what ultimately motivates many of them to launch new companies or to build new things. So that emphasis on lifelong learning, I think, is really, really important, and is perhaps one of the, if not the most important, entrepreneurial skill or competency. The final main takeaway from the season is, I think, the importance of investing time, energy, effort, intention in caring for the body, the soul, and the mind. That we are so much more than the sum of our accomplishments, and that it's important to invest in time in doing things like yoga and Reiki and just hanging out with friends and cultivating relationships with family members, and not being obsessed with just work and what our different kind of accomplishments are. That we live in a world where neoliberalism has reigned for such a long time, that there's such an emphasis on competition and success and winning. And in many ways, that's something that's built into our school system, where it's very competitive and we have to work hard, and we're kind of told that we need to compete to survive, and that in an increasingly competitive world, we need to work harder than ever in order to succeed. And I think one of the things that is coming with this new wave of entrepreneurial leaders, and I think with a lot of people, is, and also in the context of this pandemic, is an understanding that no, we don't necessarily need to be in a constant rat race against each other all the time, that we are not the sum of our accomplishments, and that it is actually essential to invest time and energy in those things that replenish us, not because they make us more productive, but because they are enjoyable in and of themselves. And I think that that's an important note. It's not doing yoga because doing yoga makes somebody more centered or so that you can then do more work. It's doing things because you want to do them. And in and of itself, that's really important.
Those are honestly great points. And I just wanted to ask you a question in regards to your statement about curiosity. In a day and age right now when there's so much information out there and there's constantly new information coming to us, how do we still stay curious without feeling burnt out with the amount of information that we're given?
It's something I grapple with a lot, because I will often be working on something and then think to myself, oh, I should Google about this random thing. What about what about the history of the Basque people in Spain? I want to start Googling about that. And then I often will stop myself and say, no, focus on one thing at a time. And there's an interesting research, I believe the researcher's name is Barry Schwartz, did about choice, which basically his research found that the more choice we have, the more fatiguing it gets. That we are in it when we're inundated with choices, we just in some cases make no decision, or we feel anxious and things. And this is something I grapple with a lot, is I'll sometimes want to go pull in all these different directions. And my advice to listeners would be a few things. One is really focus on what is your personal mission statement in life. What is the main thing you want to work on, or main things? And focus your energy on those areas. That we can't do everything in life. It is impossible. That we can, but what we can do is we can make a mark in certain areas, and to really focus. Once you have your passion, and by the way, sometimes it can take a while, and not everybody has it. But once you know what you want to do, trying to focus your energy on the specific areas. Point two is to say that when you are tempted to be distracted, is to say no to the distraction and just keep on focusing on the task at hand. And to not get pulled into the loop of starting to Wikipedia or Google all these different kinds of random things. And I would say a third comment that I would emphasize that I think is really important, which kind of is similar to what I said before, but I think deeply internalizing that sentiment that you can't do or know everything in life, and that's okay, and to accept that. And I think that the acceptance of the fact that we can't do everything and we can't know everything is really important.
I agree. I think it's also letting go of that control of needing to know everything or to doing everything. It also allows this momentum of flow in your life where, newer opportunities can come into your life that you wouldn't have expected. And then that might intrigue your interest as well. Um, and I wanted to know also is what was a tough choice that you had to make in your career?
So one, I have a relatively short career. I'm turning 30 next month, so we're still relatively young, but not
Still
as young as I
looking
once
young,
was.
still looking young, don't worry.
In terms of, I would say the most difficult decision I had to make was probably leaving Goldman Sachs when I was only 22. I was about to turn 23, and I was at Goldman Sachs. I was at a job that is socially prestigious. I was at a job that compensated me well. I was at a job where I actually enjoyed most of my colleagues. But ultimately, I felt a sense of hollowness because it wasn't really what I wanted to do in life. And that's to say, working in Goldman Sachs is a great place for many people. But for me and my interests and my talents and my desires and my areas of passion, I've never had an overwhelming interest in finance. And certainly not the back office of financial institutions. That was not, when I was 15, 16, that was not what I cared about. And it was tough. It was probably one of the toughest. It was very scary to make that decision at that very young age, to give that all up, and to take the plunge into launching Venture for Canada, which was highly uncertain. And I think a lot of people thought I was, kind of out to lunch to kind of launch this thing with my lack of experience at the time. And in retrospect, if it's funny, if I had met a probably 22-year-old in the same circumstance, I'd be thinking, oh, that person is that a good call by that person? Ultimately, I think it was a great decision. But at the time, it was really, really tough, and it caused me a lot of anxiety. But sometimes making a really tough decision is the best decision.
So what would you then say to your 22-year-old self?
Starting Venture for Canada will be a lot tougher than I realized. I think I thought at 22, I thought, oh, I'll launch Venture for Canada, and then in a year, we'll have 10, 15 staff. We'll be this big organization. We'll have all this funding. And a year into VFC, there was 2 staff. We had like a total budget of like $150,000. We were running out of cash. It takes a lot longer to build something than you realize. And a quote that I often say now is around Bill Gates, where it says, people overestimate what they can do in 3 years, and they underestimate what they can do in 10. And now 7 years into the VFC journey, I can say that is that the dream of what Venture for Canada could be was achieved eventually, but it took a lot longer than I realized. In terms of more concrete advice, I would say a few different things. One is to be less perfectionist in things, that life is uncertain and that mistakes happen, and not to be too hard on myself, and not to compare myself as to not compare myself with others as much. I would say point number 2, recognize that hiring is one of the most challenging, but also one of the most important things you do when building an organization or startup, and to be really intentional in terms of that hiring process, and that it's really tough. The hiring is very, 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 very tough. I would say a third point is to not take things too personally. I think it's easy to take things personally, but I think ultimately moving on from things. So if somebody upsets you or something that happens is upsetting, feel that emotion, don't hide it, but don't obsess about it, and eventually move on. And recognize that a lot of the time when somebody does something that gets underneath your skin or is rude to you or different things, it's because of something else going on in their life in almost all cases, and do not take it personally. I would say a fourth point is just, which I don't think I did for many years of doing Venture for Canada, although I do a lot more now, is the importance of work-life balance and really thinking about meditation and being attentive to my own thoughts and having a healthy and balanced life. I don't think I did that in the first few years of VFC, and I think it got caught up with me eventually. But I wish I probably did that younger. I think I was so focused on just succeeding and building VFC that at times I neglected some of that emphasis on the body, mind, soul that I provided in the previous question.
It's funny that you bring that up because I think, again, it seems to be a common theme that a lot of people are experiencing in this moment where, you are at home 24/7. Work ends up being your life, but you have all these feelings that pre-pandemic you aren't feeling, or you're not expressing, or you're not reflecting on. And now that you're at home and can't really do anything or keep yourself busy, they're coming up and you're left to deal with them. So a lot of the time it's really asking yourself these questions, really digging deep, because as much as it's hard to go deep, it will eventually open up a lot of doors for you, whether that's professionally or personally, because in both, in any aspect, these attributes or these behaviors help you in both sectors. But those are great reflections. I think even I myself have learned so much through all of our fellows. But moving on to our more reflection point of the podcast episode, I know that in one of our recordings, we spoke with Danny Williams, who's a 2017 VFC Fellow and a senior product designer at Shopify, on how his current role was something he didn't initially plan on getting into, but he stumbled upon. I wanted to know, what were some distinct things that you learned from speaking with Danny?
Danny has had a really interesting career path. I remember first meeting Danny back in 2015, and Danny had recently graduated from St. Mary's in his undergrad degree. And he was really entrepreneurial. He had done some startups, but he wasn't at that time 100% sure at all what he kind of wanted to do. And I think over the span of a couple of years, it's been amazing, I think, to see Danny's kind of evolution from a recent grad that was unsure of himself in some ways or uncertain in terms of what he wanted to do, to working at a couple different startups. He first started working at a startup called Norax in Halifax. Then he worked at some startups in Toronto, and then really finding his way and realizing that being a product designer and design was his passion, and really being intentional in terms of developing those skill sets and doing a lot of lifelong learning and taking control of his own career, and eventually landing a fantastic role at Shopify, allowing him to move back to Nova Scotia, have that kind of work-life balance where he can also embrace his love of surfing and being by the ocean and being by his family, with a career that is very fulfilling and aligns with his passion. So if there's one takeaway, is I just think it's most people when they graduate don't know 100% what they want to do, but through experimentation and hard work and perseverance, Danny ended up finding a role and a career that is a great fit for him.
Just in general, being able to think critically is really, really important in everyday life. When you're taking in the news or scrolling through social media, and the same can be said for communication. But I would say, designers, those are two things that I really look for. Like, say, for example, if I'm hiring, those are two things that I really, really pay attention to, because they're not so easily learned, because you need to develop those, in my opinion, over time through kind of trial and error and learning how the opposite of being good at communicating, being a shit communicator, and the opposite of thinking critically has negative consequences.
Do you find that our society nowadays is a lot more lenient when it comes to finding, your career or even your passion compared to when you were growing up or when you were at that age of deciding after university, what am I getting into?
I don't think it's necessarily changed too much. I think that there's still a lot of pressure on young people to know what their passion is or to know what their career is. While there has been the advent of, Instagram influencers who just travel around the world and post different pictures and that kind of van lifestyle and things, I do think in many ways that's also like a career. Like that's like it's a career, right? For those people.
Yeah, you're an influencer pretty much.
Yeah. And I think that there is a lot of pressure, and I think that there's a challenge for a lot of young people if they don't know what their passion is, that they feel this huge sense of anxiety because they might see friends or their parents or grandparents or relatives or, oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you graduate? What are you going to do in your career? And if someone doesn't know that answer, I think it can make them feel like that they're a failure or that they'll never know or that they'll never have a career and all these things. And I think the important advice is to say, yes, it is great to eventually find your passion. I think that that's a good end goal in people's career, but you don't need to know it right when you're first starting out. And that by focusing more on the journey and experimenting and trying different things, you'll eventually find your passion. Like it's a good, I think it's to say it's fine to have that as an eventual goal, but don't feel guilty that you don't have that, that when you're 22. Certainly when I was graduating from Georgetown, I didn't know what my passion was necessarily. I went to go work at Goldman Sachs. And I remember having this almost sense of existential dread because I had this 6-week period where I couldn't leave the United States. I couldn't work because of immigration reasons. So I was just kind of chilling in an apartment by myself. All my friends were working. And I had a lot of time to reflect. It was kind of like a mini quarantine for myself. And to your earlier question, during that 6 week where I lived like a monk, basically, and I was living by myself, some days I wouldn't see anybody, and it was during that time that I really had this idea to launch Venture for Canada. So yeah, I think that basically in a nutshell, it's to say it's okay to not know your passion, and just follow the journey rather than the outcome. And when I first started doing Venture for Canada, I didn't necessarily know it was my passion. It's you discover your passion over time.
I agree. I think similar experience happened to me at once I finished university. So I come from a journalism background, and I thought I'd get into investigative journalism, but I worked. I was an intern for a while, for about 6 months, and I was understanding the politics that comes with news organizations, and it necessarily didn't sit with my morals, right? And I was like, oh, okay, so if, I did 4 years of journalism, what's left out for me, right? And this was the time where print and digital were fighting against each other in the journalism sphere, where, newspapers were dying, and then there was this new world of digital online journalism, where at that moment of talking to different creatives, I was able to understand, okay, there's different outlets that I can still use what I learned from journalism and integrate that, whether that's audio, whether that's video creation, or whether that's now marketing. Marketing is pretty much a replication of storytelling from journalism, but allowing products and brands to build who they are or to reach a wider audience, right? So I think it's definitely taking away the pressure and time. A lot of people are told by 25, you have to have this a very successful career, or you have to have bought a house, or you have to be in a committed relationship, right? And I think that's just a bunch of societal pressures that take us away from this organic way of finding our passion and our purpose in this world, right? And it's like almost this urgency to life where we have an endless amount of time. It's just take it step by step, day by day, and you will then find your passion. But yeah, very, very interesting points. And in terms of even finding our passion, sometimes when we are trying some new things, we do come across failure, right? And I think a lot of us fear failure. And I know that my father once said that you will never be able to succeed unless you get over failure. And I noticed that in a couple of the conversations that you had, the book Failing Forward by John C. Maxwell came up. And it seems to be something talked about in the startup world a lot as well. For those who don't know, Fail Forward is about learning how to literally fail forward. As a society, we're often fearful of failure, whether that comes to our jobs, education, friendships, and relationships. Maxwell essentially is helping people build the confidence to work through failing and dealing with problems. And if you're new to the VFC family, a fun fact about Scott is that he was a part of his debate club in school. So my question to you, Scott, is in your debating competitions, how did you deal with failure?
So I think my experiences participating in competitive debate in some ways helped me deal with failure more, and then in some ways hindered me. And I'll start first with where it helped me. So for context for listeners, each year I participated in probably like 10 to 12 different debating tournaments, with each tournament being 2 to 3 days long and being like 5 to like 9 rounds of debate, each round being an hour in length. So it ends up being a lot of debating rounds, plus daily practices that I participated in with my school, debating research. And then I was quite the nerdy child. I did debate camps in the summer and various different kinds of things. So it was a huge part of my life. And just given the sheer amount of debate tournaments I went to, obviously I lost a fair amount of rounds. You don't win everything in life. At the same time, my team did really well, and I did quite well in terms of competitive debating. I was on the national debating team, came second in the country, and had really high standards for myself. So I think on the positive of what debating did was it did teach me that just to constantly face failure, and that at the amount of times I lost or wouldn't get a score I would like, it just kind of taught you just to deal with it and just move on and to develop that little bit of sense of resilience. And then it's about the journey, that you're just constantly learning. You're never going to be, the top, always perfect. Where I think I could have done better in terms of dealing with competitive debating were I think a few different things. I think one is I actually think in retrospect, I put too much pressure on myself sometimes, that because I was performing at a quite high level, that if I didn't achieve a result that I wanted, I would be really upset. I remember after the junior high national debating championships, I didn't do well and I was devastated. And I think most kids that age, when you're participating in things and you want to achieve a goal and you don't get it, you can be upset at any age. But I remember just being completely devastated. There were other points too where I didn't do well in certain tournaments, and I was just really hard on myself. And I think in retrospect, what I should have done, and probably have been healthier, is to say, yeah, you know what, that's sad. I wish I did better in that tournament, but I learned all these new things, and there's always next tournament. And that just because you didn't do well is not the end of the world, that I'm not equal to my kind of accomplishments. So in sum, I think competitive debate taught me to have high standards, to be ambitious, to work hard, to follow my dreams. But I think I put a little too much pressure on myself. And I wish I took myself less seriously at the time, because I think I put so much pressure on myself that it became unhealthy at certain points.
It's that aspect of competitiveness that definitely puts that unhealthy pressure. I think like even myself, who comes from a sports background, I remember we had a basketball tournament that we lost by 1 point. And I kid you not, that is still something me and my teammates talk about till this day. And this happened about 7-8 years ago, right? It's any, I think, competitive aspect that will definitely make you put pressure on yourself, or not allow you to learn from the lesson of that. And I know we also interviewed Dessie Maliaka, who is a VFC 2019 fellow and co-founder at Sustainably Stocked, who's also the Innovation Hero X. She talked about sports and how failure in sports was a key lesson and skill set she built early on, which then prepared for her entrepreneurial journey.
Among the top, things that I really found to be super valuable in the context of, professionalism is, time management is at the top of it. Being a student athlete requires you to do a lot of looking at how much time you have in the day, making sure that you're getting the things done to be a good student, as well as getting the things done so you can be a top-notch athlete. It's definitely amongst the top of them. I would also say being comfortable with losing. In sports, the ones that I play, there's always a winner, there's always a loser. And sometimes you're on the losing side of the pitch. Being able to deal with the fact that at that point you weren't the best, but also understanding that from losing, there's also a lot of learning and being able to pick yourself up after a big loss, because it can be gut-wrenching to lose a big match, to be in the semifinals and lose a match by 1 point, or lose a match at the last second of the game. It's heartbreaking. To be able to pick yourself up from that and still be motivated to get to training the next morning, super important, especially in the context, I think, of professionalism in the workforce.
I wanted to also ask you this, is how important is it to face failure for an entrepreneur?
I think it's absolutely essential. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to constantly face failure, and you're going to try new things. They won't work out. And I read actually a quote on this, I think it was today, or it was really recently, but it was basically talking about that if you haven't had something in the last 6 months that you failed in like a significant way, then you're not doing something right. Like, you need to like constantly be having like these little sort of mini failures. I think obviously it's something where you don't have a life of having massive big failures, right? And I think that we don't want to glamorize failure too much. But I think I think if you're not having any failure in your life, you're not like pushing yourself, and you're also not taking risks, and not like, life is about taking risks, and it's about pushing yourself sometimes, and it's about learning new things within limits. And so I think for entrepreneurs, failure and the ability to deal with failure is absolutely essential, including that means like, if you're going to launch a new initiative, like recognizing it could fail, and that's okay.
And how do you think then failing forward has shaped the way VFC was built and continues to grow?
In a few different ways. I think one is that many not-for-profits or charities tend to be very risk averse, and they just kind of do the same thing over and over again. And for instance, we could have done that we could have just said, we're going to be a fellowship program, and we're going to do this fellowship program forever, and just run a fellowship program. And we still do the fellowship program, and the fellowship program is a big part of what Venture for Canada does, but it is not the only thing. Since then, we've launched 4 new programs of, in many ways, while all mission aligned, very different than the fellowship program. And so I think whenever you're launching these new things, there's the potential that they won't work out, that there will be failure. And there's certainly things that Venture for Canada, many things Venture for Canada has tried to do that sometimes haven't worked at various points, including with the fellowship program at different points. So I think that a big part of VFC's identity as an entrepreneurial not-for-profit is taking big risks, calculated risks, at growing our impact. And that means potentially failing.
I completely agree with you on there. And I think also one thing to note is allowing room for trial and error, to try new things out, to see where those go. If there's an error, learn from that error and move on. That's pretty much the way that you can cope in this world, and even in business structures, or in finding your passion, or even in education as well. So as we come to the end of this special episode, where we're just taking the moment to reflect on some of the key points that you were intrigued by, a common theme in season 1 was asking people what it meant to them to be entrepreneurial. And what did you find was the connecting line around what everyone said, especially around the topic of transitioning from working at a startup, and going out and starting their own businesses and ventures?
There are many different ways, I think, to be entrepreneurial. And I think one of the first, going back to the failure point, is the importance of being comfortable taking risks. And an inherently related component to that is being comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. That entrepreneurs are constantly operating in this world where you don't know what's going to happen, and you're taking risks and you're making bets. And I think that point about kind of calculated risk taking and comfortableness with uncertainty is something that came up in a lot of the different interviews. Misha talks about launching her company and the risks kind of she had to take, and probably still I'm sure it takes to this day. Same with Chris running an early stage venture. So I would say that first point is a really important one to note. The second entrepreneurial kind of characteristic that I would emphasize is I think similar to what we talked about earlier, which is creativity and curiosity. I think we see that across all the different fellows in different ways. It's like the way that they get these new ideas, that they continue to build their businesses or their organizations, is through that curiosity, that it's what drives them, and it's where a lot of their creativity comes from. I'd say 3 is, and I think you see this across the fellow alumni in different ways, is the importance of like social skills or human skills in being a successful entrepreneur. So that's the ability to work well with others. That's the ability to communicate effectively. That's the ability to self-regulate one's own emotions. I think it's all these different kinds of things are so crucial when it comes to being a successful entrepreneur. When you look at the EntreComp framework, entrepreneurial competency framework that the European Union created, that Venture for Canada uses, they have these 15 different entrepreneurial areas, and so many of them are really human skills. And while Venture for Canada uses the EntreComp framework of entrepreneurship is to act upon opportunities to create value for others, I think that a lot of entrepreneurial skills, like working with others, and are really foundational skills across all of life. And that to be a successful entrepreneur often requires having these fundamental human skills.
On your point to human skills, we actually had a recording with David Kantanka, an account director at Trevor Peter. He is someone that I found very interesting because he spoke about learning through others' experiences so that he himself wouldn't go through the same situations or problems later down the line. And he also spoke about the importance of mentorship.
I don't even think I have the words to describe what mentorship has done for my career and even like personal life as well. I think that you have different mentors for different things, and you'll have different mentors as you go through your career. The person who might be your mentor when you're just getting into a job, for example, might not be the person who's your mentor when you're scaling up a company. And so it's ever changing. I don't think one person fills every single need there, but having a mentor or multiple mentors for different parts of your life, basically I look at it as a way to accelerate your growth and accelerate, your learnings, because they're going to instill in you the things that they learned. And if you're willing and open to listening, you can actually learn those lessons vicariously through them. And so you can actually get ahead by paying attention to the things that they're telling you. And anybody who was looking for a mentor or thinking about possibly getting one or trying to figure out how to find one, a lot of the times, sometimes depending on the spaces you're in, it might be organic, right? Like you get a new job and they hook you up with a buddy and a partner, and that person's been there 10 years and all of a sudden now you click and they're your mentor. So that's a bit more organic. And there's some less organic methods like the reach out, right? Like there's somebody who you follow where you're just like, this person's so cool and the work they're doing really inspires me. You can do a reach out to them, and not to say you're always going to get a yes, or you might even get a reply, but at least you took the chance and you reached out and you attempted it, and you do enough of that. And I'm sure, you'll get to somebody who is a right fit for you in that space.
So I wanted to know, who have been your personal mentors, and how has mentorship helped you personally, and how does that reflect in the way VFC Its foundation is built around training and offering resources to young Canadians.
So I think that mentorship is something really important for all people, particularly people beginning their career. I think mentorship can take many different forms. I think it can take informal mentorship within companies, like a manager mentoring a direct report. There can be formal mentorship. There's peer mentorship. I think that's really important of working with peers. I think in my case, I would say there's two different things that have been really important. I think first off is the relationship that the board chair of Venture for Canada and myself have built over 7 years of just work, and his name is Parm Gill. We've worked super closely, chatting on a at least weekly basis for almost 7 years. And I think that the extent of that, it was one of those things where the relationship evolved over time, but at many different points, Parm has been crucial to where Venture for Canada is today. And he's given a ton of different valuable advice. He's really stepped up at different points when the organization was at risk or we were in a kind of crisis situation. And he's also given me a ton of different advice. He's around close to 20 years older than me. He's gone through the experience of building things. And at various points when I've gone through tough challenges or been experiencing tough experiences, Parm's advice and the fact that he's been through these things has been crucial to me. And having that constant in my life over the last 7 years has been super helpful and something I'm really appreciative of. In the context of Venture for Canada, we certainly encourage fellows and interns to find out and seek mentors. And I think we've also provided a great platform for a lot of peer mentorship, that a lot of fellows build these really strong relationships with one another and provide advice, feedback, support that is crucial. And the final point I'll note is just, I think in life, relationships are so important that you look at a lot of these longitudinal studies on happiness. And ultimately the people who are happiest when they're at their deathbed have really strong interpersonal relationships. It's not how much money they have. It's not different things. It's the quality of their relationships that often really matters. So, and I think a mentorship mentee relationship, it can be like a really transformational, like positive relationship for someone's life. So I'm a big fan of mentorship. The only point I'll say actually at the end is that I don't think it's something where it's approaching somebody to say, will you be my mentor? Like that's not really how it works. That the best mentorship relationships evolve naturally over time. And that's certainly the case of Parm and I. And you know it when you see it. So I think you want to try to, find mentors, but you don't want to be too, oh, I saw this person on LinkedIn, I want this person to be my mentor. It's more about the fit between you and the person, which it's kind of like dating, like what you naturally kind of explore over time.
That's a great way to explain that. I completely agree with mentorship. For myself, a lot of the times it was just out of curiosity what the person did. So I was very interested in the way that they did their job or how creative they might have been. And naturally, our connection just grew and they ended up being a mentor without me even asking, right? But I do find mentorship is very, very important. And for people like ourselves, if we have the platform to do so, or we even have the expertise to do so, it's definitely very important that we pass it down to the youth, because the youth are essentially going to be the ones who are continuing to change our society and to drive change, right? I find it in my own time, I help a lot of youth here in Toronto get in touch with their creative skills, whether that's understanding how to film a short video or to edit a short video, and to give them the opportunity and voices to do that, because that's not something I had. And because I have that now, I can give that to other people. And you mentioned something about quality of relationships, and this is something that comes up in a lot of interviews, as well as our communities. How do you develop quality communities, and how do you see community playing a role in life in the future?
I'll start with the second part. So I think communities and social connectedness, I think, is more important today, is as important today as it ever was. And I'd say the challenge that exists, especially as we're in the pandemic, but this predates the pandemic, is I think that we are in a situation where there is more social isolation than there ever was. And this has been a long-term trend. There's a famous book by like an American sociologist called Bowling Alone from like 2 decades ago, which talks about kind of the breakdown of social relationships over time. And it's all, there's other studies that show around like the percentage of people who say their best friend is their partner, like that is substantially increased. And that people just have less friends than they used to. For some of the neoliberalism and because if you're just all focused on competing and in career success, you don't have time for relationships, right? Or you have time for fewer relationships. So I think community is something really important. It's important for health, mental health, physical health. It's important, I think, just for like your happiness. Yeah. And being a part of those kind of communities are something really important. I'll share a brief anecdote is when I was in university, I was active in 2 big sort of student organizations, principally. One was the College Democrats and this thing called DC Student Speak, which kind of overlapped. And the other was the International Relations Club, 2 of the biggest student organizations at Georgetown. And even though I was in the School of Foreign Service and I loved international relations a lot more, and in many ways probably would have made sense that the International Relations Club was the main thing that I would have like loved participating in, they weren't my tribe. They weren't the kind of like when I was in that organization, I didn't build lasting friendships. I don't keep in touch with really anybody from there. Now go to the College Democrats, even though I'm not American, it was kind of random that I ended up being on their board and very active and doing all these things. The lasting relationships that I maintain post-university are almost all on College Democrats. And I actually wish in retrospect that I spent more time doing College Democrats and less with International Relations Club. And I think all this is to say is that like community is so important. And I think it's important to find like a community that you fit in, like that you feel shares your values, that you just like, when you're there, you're like, these are my people. This is the kind of people who I want to spend a lot of time with. So to answer the first part of your question, which is how our communities create or foster, I think, there are a few. I think one, it's bringing like-minded people who have shared values, but maybe very diverse backgrounds and experiences. But I think that shared values piece is really important. I think it was probably something in retrospect that why I think we as the College Democrats got along so well sometimes is that there was this sort of shared value amongst like everybody participating in it, even though we were really, really different. I would say the second is that I think in most successful communities, there has to be a sense of accountability so that there's values, but that they're upheld and that people can't just kind of get away with anything. And that there's community standards. And I think that that's really important in a community. So in short, I think communities are something, it's so important and they're really hard to create, particularly in this digital era and where people are so busy, but they're more important than they ever were.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's so important to find your tribe. It's something that in the movie Soul, I don't know if you've watched that yet, the Disney movie, that is something they talk about is finding your tribe and how important it is to find people that allow you to be yourself and your most authentic self, because again, that allows you to flourish in your personal life and even in your professional life. So as Scott said, find your community, find your tribe. But thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and authentically share your reflections on this recording of the podcast, Scott. It's amazing to see how far we've been able to come and how far we're going to go, inspiring a lot of young Canadians to tap into their entrepreneurial mindsets. For now, that's it from us. And if this is your first time listening to our podcast, please check us out on all of your favorite streaming platforms, and make sure to listen to our previous episodes where we speak to fellows like Misha Saad, Mark Dillon, and Kiki Athanas. And also make sure that you stay connected to all of our social media platforms to find out more about the launch of our next season. I'm Lateefa Farah, and you were speaking to Scott Stirrett, the host of the New Wave of Entrepreneurship.
That's it for this week's episode of A New Wave of Entrepreneurship. Stay connected with us via our social and our email list. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss our next episode. If you have feedback on today's episode, tweet us at Venture4Canada, that is Venture, the number 4 Canada, or email us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I'm Scott Stirrett, and until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and stay grateful. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is produced by Juanita Lee Garcia and Lateefa Farah. Editing and mixing also done by Lateefa Farah. Erica Ormiston is our editorial assistant. Mark Wallach and Premium Beat own the copyright and publishing rights related to the song used in this podcast. The comments and opinions, recommendations, or suggestions expressed on the podcast by the guests are not liable to Venture for Canada and belong solely to each individual. Any information provided stated by our guests and our host is independent of Venture for Canada. A New Wave of Entrepreneurship is a Venture for Canada brand, and all content is owned by Venture for Canada. If you'd like to use our content, please reach out to us at podcast@venture4, that's spelled FOR, Canada.ca.